Hogwarts is a school. School of magic.
This scene from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince marks the first encounter between Tom and the wizarding world, a moment teetering on the edge of two possibilities, redemption or darkness. But as the conversation unfolds, it becomes clear that mistrust and isolation are already deeply ingrained in Tom's psyche. Before Harry Potter faced Voldemort in the Great Hall, the wizarding world had already cast its judgment. Voldemort was evil, irredeemable, and the cause of untold suffering. But what if the Dark Lord's story had another side? What if the roots of his villainy lay not in innate malice, but in a series of failures, personal, societal, and institutional? As Albus Dumbledore once remarked, it is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Yet for Tom Riddle, the choices were shaped by neglect, prejudice, and a world unwilling to see beyond his potential for greatness. Was Voldemort a victim of his own circumstances as much as he was a perpetrator of evil? It's a question worth exploring, especially in a narrative that prides itself on complex characters and moral lessons. After all, every villain is the hero of their own story. Consider Voldemort's origins, a boy born into abandonment, raised in an unloving orphanage, and thrust into a wizarding world that viewed him with suspicion. These experiences, coupled with his own insecurities, laid the groundwork for the fear-driven path he would take. So, what does this say about the wizarding world? By reducing Voldemort to a one-dimensional antagonist, we risk ignoring the systematic flaws that fostered his rise. How did the prejudice against Slytherins and the failures of mentors like Dumbledore contribute to the making of a Dark Lord? And could a different approach have altered his destiny? This analysis delves deep into the heart of Voldemort's character, challenging the simplistic dichotomy of good versus evil. We'll explore the societal structures that failed him, the personal traumas that shaped him, and the choices that ultimately defined him. Was Tom Riddle doomed to darkness, or did the wizarding world turn its back on him when he needed guidance the most? In the words of Sirius Black, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. It's time to reconsider Voldemort's place in this moral spectrum and ask the uncomfortable question: who is the real villain of this story? Before Voldemort became the feared Dark Lord, he was Tom Marvolo Riddle, a child burdened with an unrelentingly grim start in life. Born into a fractured family, his mother, Merope Gaunt, came from a line of pure-blood wizards steeped in prejudice and cruelty. Her life was a tragic cycle of abuse, culminating in her death shortly after giving birth. Tom's father, a Muggle named Tom Riddle Sr., abandoned her, leaving their son to be raised in a Muggle orphanage. From the outset, Tom's life was marked by rejection. The orphanage provided little warmth or nurturing, and Tom's budding magical abilities only served to isolate him further. Tales of his childhood paint a picture of a boy who exhibited early signs of control and manipulation, traits born not from malice but as survival mechanisms in a hostile environment. The defining moment in Tom's early life came with Albus Dumbledore's visit. The scene is iconic, Dumbledore revealing to young Tom that he is not only a wizard but also destined for Hogwarts, a place that promised belonging and recognition. Yet the encounter also foreshadowed the challenges to come. Tom's pride and mistrust were already evident. He demanded answers, sought control, and showed a penchant for domination that unnerved even Dumbledore. At Hogwarts, Tom's brilliance was undeniable. He excelled academically, charmed his professors, and quickly rose to prominence among his peers. Yet he remained aloof, relying on his cunning and ambition to navigate the social labyrinth of the wizarding school. His affiliation with Slytherin House, often maligned as a breeding ground for dark wizards, only deepened the prejudices against them. This pattern mirrors the stories of historical figures like Adolf Hitler, whose tumultuous childhood and feelings of rejection fueled his obsession with power and control. Like Tom, Hitler experienced abuse and neglect, developing a deep-seated resentment that shaped his destructive ambitions. Similarly, Ivan the Terrible's childhood, marked by violence and loss, led to a reign of paranoia and cruelty, an echo of the isolation and mistrust that haunted Tom. Even more parallels arise with figures like Saddam Hussein. Raised in a turbulent and abusive household, Hussein's early experiences instilled a profound mistrust of others and a ruthless approach to securing authority. These real-world examples illustrate how early trauma and rejection can steer individuals toward paths of destruction, mirroring Tom's transformation into Voldemort. In a broader sense, consider Nikola Tesla's story, a creative visionary often misunderstood and isolated. Tesla's loneliness and lack of support, while not leading to moral corruption, highlight the human need for recognition and guidance. Tom's life diverges significantly in its moral implications, yet both narratives underscore the impact of neglect and isolation on human potential. The world of magic, instead of embracing Tom and guiding him towards a better path, further alienated him. Teachers admired his talents but overlooked his growing darkness. Fellow students feared his intensity but failed to understand his isolation. Even Dumbledore, who suspected the dangers in Tom's nature, kept his distance, offering little mentorship or empathy. The lack of intervention at this crucial stage allowed Tom's darker instincts to fester. His discovery of his parentage, a Muggle father who rejected him and a mother who died in despair, fueled his hatred for Muggles and his obsession with blood purity. It was not long before he began seeking out forbidden knowledge, including the creation of Horcruxes, which symbolized his ultimate rejection of vulnerability and mortality. Tom's journey from an isolated child to a feared Dark Lord is a testament to the consequences of neglect and prejudice. What might have happened if the wizarding world had looked beyond his arrogance and ambition to see the frightened boy beneath? Could a supportive system have steered him away from darkness? Or was the path to Voldemort inevitable in a society so steeped in bias and fear? These questions linger as we trace Voldemort's origins, forcing us to reconsider the labels of hero and villain. In the end, was Tom Riddle truly destined for darkness, or did the world around him light the way?
I can speak to snakes too. They find me. Whisper things. Is that normal for someone like me?
Harry Potter and Tom Riddle's lives mirror each other in striking ways. Both orphans, both shaped by early neglect, yet where Harry finds love and allies, Tom finds only alienation and suspicion. These contrasts reveal not just their individual choices, but also the systematic flaw of their world. At Hogwarts, Harry is surrounded by friends like Hermione and Ron, mentors like Dumbledore and Hagrid, and a broader community that embraces him. Tom, on the other hand, is left to navigate the school's labyrinthine politics alone. Even as he excels academically, his peers fear him, his teachers mistrust him, and his house, Slytherin, is stigmatized as inherently dark. This isolation feeds his burgeoning resentment. Dumbledore's role highlights this double standard. With Harry, he invests time and guidance, offering wisdom and encouragement. With Tom, he keeps his distance, suspecting him of dangerous tendencies but doing little to address them. This selective mentorship reflects a broader systematic failure. The wizarding world values those it deems worthy, while neglecting those it views as threats, reinforcing cycles of alienation and hostility. Consider another Slytherin, Draco Malfoy. Like Tom, Draco is marked by his house and family's reputation. Yet, while Draco teeters on the edge of darkness, he is ultimately spared Voldemort's fate. Why? Perhaps because, despite his flaws, he is not entirely isolated. He has family, peers, and even moments of doubt that anchor him. Tom, lacking such anchors, succumbs fully to his darker instincts. The Sorting Hat's role is emblematic of this systemic bias. By dividing students into houses based on fixed traits, it enforces divisions rather than fostering collaboration. Slytherin, in particular, becomes a scapegoat for the wizarding world's prejudices. What if, instead of pitting houses against each other, Hogwarts emphasized unity and understanding? Could such an approach have bridged the gap between Tom and his peers? Moreover, the wizarding community's failure to offer reformative opportunities is glaring. Azkaban, the wizarding prison, is a testament to the lack of empathy in their justice system. Instead of rehabilitation, it ensures perpetual punishment. What if young Tom had been met with a system designed to guide and support troubled students rather than ostracize them? Harry's life underscores the power of community. Despite his struggles, he is buoyed by love and friendship, which help him resist the temptations of power. Tom's life underscores the cost of isolation. Without allies or empathy, his ambition becomes destructive, his brilliance twisted into cruelty. It's as though he was handed all the ingredients for success, but chose to bake a disaster cake instead, adding resentment instead of compassion. These parallel journeys force us to question the role of the system in shaping their fates. Isolated brilliance is like a garden left untended. What could bloom with care instead grows wild, with thorns overtaking the beauty. In the end, the question remains, could Tom Riddle's story have been different if the wizarding world had extended him the same compassion it offered Harry? And what does this say about the narratives we construct around good and evil? Voldemort's transformation from Tom Riddle, a boy with a troubled past, to the feared Dark Lord is a story that invites critical analysis of trauma, survival mechanisms, and societal failure. To truly understand his motivations, we must delve into the psychology behind his choices and the systematic flaws that enabled his rise. At the heart of Voldemort's character lies a deep-seated fear of death. Mortality, to him, is not a natural part of existence, but the ultimate failure. This fear drives his relentless quest for power and control, culminating in the creation of Horcruxes. These objects, which fragment his soul, are more than magical artifacts. They are metaphors for his fragmented psyche. Each Horcrux externalizes a piece of his pain and ensures he avoids confronting his humanity. Yet, in doing so, Voldemort becomes less human and more monstrous. Fan theories suggest that Voldemort's Horcruxes symbolize unresolved trauma. Just as he splits his soul to achieve immortality, he isolates himself emotionally, rejecting connections that could make him vulnerable. This coping mechanism ensures his survival, but at a cost: the loss of empathy, love, and true strength. Voldemort's inability to trust or care for others sets him apart from other characters in the Harry Potter series, including Severus Snape and even Draco Malfoy, both of whom show moments of doubt and redemption. From a psychological perspective, Voldemort's journey exemplifies the concept of cognitive dissonance, the conflict between his belief in pureblood superiority and his own half-blood origins. This internal contradiction fuels his obsession with erasing any trace of his Muggle ancestry, creating a cycle of denial and projection. The fear of being exposed as impure becomes a driving force behind his ideology, as he seeks to validate his superiority by oppressing others. Additionally, Voldemort's leadership style reflects a heightened fear response. Psychologists note that individuals driven by fear often adapt authoritarian tendencies, using control and intimidation to maintain power. Voldemort's reign thrives on fear, not respect, as he manipulates his followers and punishes dissent. This fear-driven approach isolates him further, creating a leadership model based on dominance rather than loyalty. Historically, figures like Genghis Khan provide an illuminating comparison. Genghis, born into a marginalized and tumultuous life, rose to power through sheer ambition and strategic brilliance. Like Voldemort, he was driven by a need to dominate and leave a lasting legacy. However, Genghis's leadership also had elements of unity and reform, qualities Voldemort deliberately rejected. Instead of seeking to unite, Voldemort thrived on isolation, exploiting societal fears to solidify his power. Joseph McCarthy's infamous Red Scare further parallels Voldemort's reign of terror. McCarthy's paranoia and need to identify enemies created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust, much like Voldemort's exploitation of the wizarding world's existing prejudices. Both figures manipulated societal insecurities to validate their own worldviews, forcing others to conform or face destruction. Yet what makes Voldemort's story particularly tragic is how avoidable it might have been. His early life was a series of missed opportunities for intervention. From his days in the orphanage to his time at Hogwarts, Tom Riddle's potential for greatness was overshadowed by neglect and suspicion. The wizarding world's biases against Slytherins and its rigid societal structures reinforced his belief that power was the only path to security. Dumbledore's wariness, while understandable, kept him at arm's length when empathy might have made a difference. Universally, Voldemort's journey touches on a common human experience: the fear of rejection. We have all faced moments where our ideas or identities were dismissed, fueling a determination to prove ourselves. Voldemort's response to rejection, choosing domination over connection, reflects an extreme version of a struggle many can recognize. His inability to embrace vulnerability leaves him trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, where every action to secure immortality alienates him further from humanity. His relationship with death, and by extension love, also warrants examination. In the series, Harry Potter's abilities to embrace mortality becomes his greatest strength, allowing him to triumph over Voldemort. Voldemort, by contrast, sees love as a weakness, something to be eradicated rather than understood. His disdain for love and friendship isolates him further, leaving him incapable of building the alliances that might have tempered his ambitions. This brings us to Voldemort's most tragic flaw, his inability to see value in vulnerability. Where Harry learns that strength comes from connections and courage in the face of fear, Voldemort views vulnerability as a threat. His ideology, centered on purity and domination, is a shield against his own insecurities, a way to project power while hiding his deepest fears. Ultimately, Voldemort's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of neglecting the vulnerable. It forces us to consider whether true evil is born or made. His journey from a scared orphan to a feared dictator reflects the cost of a society that values power over compassion and control over understanding. In the end, Voldemort's downfall lies in his inability to grasp the very thing that makes life meaningful: connection. While his intellect and power make him formidable, his lack of empathy leaves him isolated, a self-made exile in his quest for immortality. His story challenges us to look beyond labels of hero and villain, to examine the systems and choices that define our paths, and to ask, how do we prevent the next Voldemort from rising?
They might misunderstand.
Go on.
I was in the library the other night, in the restricted section. It's something rather odd about a bit of rare magic. I thought perhaps you could illuminate me.
To understand Voldemort's place in the pantheon of fictional villains, it is insightful to compare him to other complex antagonists in literature and popular media. These comparisons reveal just how his motivations, actions, and ultimate fate align with or diverge from the archetypal villain's journey. Kylo Ren, the conflicted antagonist of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, offers a striking contrast to Voldemort. Both characters are driven by their quest for power, but where Voldemort's ambition stems from fear and control, Kylo Ren's struggle is deeply rooted in his internal conflicts between the light and dark sides of the Force. Unlike Voldemort, Kylo is given opportunities for redemption, and his journey ends in an act of self-sacrifice. This contrast highlights a deeper question: does the possibility of redemption lie in our environment or in our choices? Kylo's arc invites empathy because of the people who challenge him to change, while Voldemort's closed-off nature and lack of meaningful relationships prevent such opportunities. Is Voldemort's downfall the product of his choices, or did the wizarding world's failure to nurture him seal his fate? Marvel's Loki, the god of mischief, shares Voldemort's thirst for power and recognition, but differs significantly in his approach and growth. Loki's early actions, much like Voldemort's, are driven by feelings of inadequacy and a desire to prove his worth. However, Loki's cunning and humor make him a more relatable and multi-dimensional character. Loki's redemption arc, spanning multiple films and his self-titled series, underscores his ability to change. His experiences, particularly his interactions with others, challenge his worldview and gradually shift his priorities. By contrast, Voldemort's rigid ideology prevents him from adapting or evolving. Could Voldemort's story have followed a similar path if he had encountered figures who challenged his beliefs? Or was he too entrenched in his fear of vulnerability to ever consider change? On the opposite end of the spectrum, Sauron from Lord of the Rings represents the archetype of pure, incorporeal evil. Unlike Voldemort, Sauron's character lacks a nuanced backstory or moments of humanity. He is a malevolent force, defined solely by his desire for domination. But does the absence of a backstory make Sauron's evil less compelling, or does it elevate him as a symbol of abstract corruption? Voldemort's layered history, rooted in trauma and insecurity, contrasts with Sauron's simplicity. Is Voldemort's complexity an advantage, or does it make his ultimate downfall even more tragic, as it reminds us how different his story could have been? Walter White from Breaking Bad serves as a modern example of a character whose descent into villainy mirrors some aspects of Voldemort's journey. Both characters begin with potential for greatness, but make choices that lead them down dark paths. Walter's transformation into Heisenberg is driven by pride, desperation, and a desire to leave a legacy, echoing Voldemort's own motivations. Walter's arc, however, forces viewers to question, at what point does a person's ambition cross the line into villainy? While Voldemort's story positions him as a product of his environment, Walter's descent feels more like a series of conscious decisions. Is one form of villainy more forgivable than the other? Or does intent matter less than impact? Despite their differences, these villains share universal themes that resonate with audiences. Fear, ambition, and the longing for recognition are central to their stories. Voldemort's character stands out for his refusal to engage with these emotions constructively. Where others wrestle with their humanity, he rejects it entirely, turning fear into tyranny and ambition into destruction. This raises a key question. Does isolation drive ambition, or is it ambition that isolates us? Voldemort's story suggests a cyclical relationship between the two, where each feeds the other, leaving no room for redemption. By rejecting vulnerability, Voldemort cuts himself off from the very connections that might have saved him. The comparisons also highlight Voldemort's missed opportunities for redemption. While characters like Loki and Kylo Ren find moments of connection that challenge their paths, Voldemort's isolation and rigid ideology prevent him from evolving. His story forces us to ask, can true evil ever be undone, or is it cemented by a series of irreversible choices? Ultimately, these comparisons deepen our understanding of Voldemort as a villain. He is neither a caricature of evil nor a wholly sympathetic figure, but a tragic character shaped by fear, trauma, and systematic failure. His journey challenges us to consider the complexities of villainy and the fine line between hero and antagonist.
Can you only split the soul once? For instance, it's 7.
7? Merlin's beard, Tom. Isn't it bad enough to consider killing one person? To rip the soul into 7 pieces? This is all hypothetical, isn't all academic.
Of course, sir. It'll be our little secret.
Having explored Voldemort's complex character and the societal failures that contributed to his transformation, we are left with a provocative question. What could have been done differently? Could Tom Riddle's story have taken a different path? And how might the wizarding world have intervened to prevent his descent into darkness? At the heart of Voldemort's story lies his time at Hogwarts, a pivotal period where intervention might have altered his trajectory. The Sorting Hat's rigid house system, which divides students based on inherent traits, fosters division and rivalry. Slytherin House in particular suffers from a stigmatized reputation as a breeding ground for dark wizards. By labeling Tom Riddle as a Slytherin prodigy, the system reinforced his isolation and ambition to prove himself. A more inclusive approach at Hogwarts could have made a significant difference. Imagine a mentorship program where students are guided by mentors from various houses, breaking down stereotypes and encouraging collaboration. Hogwarts, in this sense, was like a garden with labeled plots, one for roses, another for weeds. Tom was put in the weeds section and left to flourish unchecked, his ambition growing wild. By fostering a sense of community and belonging, Hogwarts might have countered the alienation that fueled his rise. The wizarding world's systematic biases against muggles and magical creatures also contributed to Voldemort's ideology. Tom's hatred for muggles was not born in isolation, but was reinforced by a society that tolerated blood purity rhetoric. The Ministry of Magic, with its history of corruption and selective justice, failed to address these prejudices, allowing them to fester. What if the Ministry had actively promoted equality and inclusion? Policies advocating for Muggle-born rights, education reform, and anti-discrimination measures could have challenged the foundation of Voldemort's ideology. It's as if the wizarding world had all the ingredients for a harmonious society, but decided to make a recipe for disaster instead. A recurring theme in Voldemort's story is the lack of meaningful mentorship. While Dumbledore recognized Tom's potential for greatness, he approached him with caution rather than compassion. This distance only deepened Tom's mistrust and belief that power was his only ally. What if Dumbledore had taken a more proactive role in guiding Tom? Imagine if Dumbledore's mentorship had been more like a life coach who sees the warning signs early. Tom, you're steering the ship towards the iceberg. Early intervention, coupled with counseling and emotional support, could have encouraged him to channel his ambition positively. Rather than seeking domination, he might have found fulfillment in leadership and innovation. While Voldemort's arc ends in tragedy, alternative storytelling techniques could have offered glimpses of potential redemption. Flashbacks showing Tom's moments of doubt or internal struggle might have made him a more relatable and sympathetic character. By exploring his humanity, audiences could better understand the weight of his choices and the societal failures that shaped them. Imagine a storyline where Tom faces his younger self, grappling with the consequences of his actions. It's like looking into a cracked mirror, each shard reflecting what could have been. Such a narrative device would have provided a powerful reflection on the transformative power of empathy and connection. It wouldn't absolve him of his actions, but would present him as a cautionary tale about the cost of neglecting vulnerability. The climax of Voldemort's story offers another opportunity for a better arc. Rather than focusing solely on his defeat, imagine an ending where he confronts his own fears and regrets. Perhaps a moment where he recognizes the hollowness of his pursuits could have added emotional depth to his downfall. Such an ending wouldn't change his fate, but would leave audiences pondering the systematic failures and personal choices that led him there. It's as though Voldemort built a towering castle of ambition, only to find it hollow inside. His legacy, like a sandcastle swept away by the tide, would serve as a stark reminder of what could have been. Voldemort's story is one of tragedy, ambition, and missed opportunities. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, systematic failure, and the cost of neglecting the vulnerable. Yet it is also a narrative that challenges us to think critically about the constructs of good and evil, asking us to explore the grey areas that define human nature. At its core, Voldemort's downfall was not just the result of his own choices, but a reflection of the world that shaped him. The wizarding world, with its rigid structures and ingrained prejudices, failed to provide him with the guidance and empathy he needed. This systematic neglect allows his fear and ambition to grow unchecked, ultimately consuming him. But is it fair to place all the blame on the system? Or does Voldemort's refusal to embrace vulnerability indicate a deeper, more personal failing? What can we learn from this story? First, it reminds us of the importance of empathy and understanding, especially toward those who are marginalized or misunderstood. It's easy to label someone as a villain, but as Voldemort's journey shows, every villain starts as a person with potential. Could Tom Riddle's fate have been different if even one adult had reached out to him with compassion? Or was his ambition always destined to isolate him? Second, Voldemort's story underscores the power of connection. While he sought immortality through fear and domination, Harry Potter's triumph came through love, friendship, and selflessness. It's a reminder that true strength lies not in isolation, but in unity. But here's a question to ponder. Does isolation drive ambition, or is it ambition that isolates us? And how often do we undervalue the power of connection in our own lives? Finally, this tale calls us to reflect on our own biases and the system we uphold. Are we creating environments where ambition is nurtured positively, or are we reinforcing divisions that breed resentment and mistrust? Like Hogwarts, our schools, workplaces, and communities have the potential to be places of growth or exclusion. The choice is ours. Are we fostering the next generation of leaders, or are we inadvertently creating barriers that stifle potential? As we leave the world of Harry Potter and return to our own, let us take these lessons to heart. How can we apply them to our daily lives? How can we ensure that the next generation of Tom Riddles are given the tools they need to thrive without succumbing to darkness? Let's start by asking ourselves, what kind of world do we want to build, and what role will we play in shaping it?